Hellishly Fantastical, a trip report by Samwise, uploaded to airwood.org December 22nd, 2013. I've been meaning to submit this experience for a while, as this was probably the craziest drug encounter I've ever had. I'm a bit of a drug veteran, even back then, particularly with psychedelics. It was the summer after graduation, and it was the summer in a lot of ways. I had a lot of money and a carefree attitude. One fateful day, my friend Drew and I met a friend Jay by chance in a park. He told us about how his cousin had given him some kind of strange plant, and you can apparently trip out from it. I was up for pretty much anything, minus heroin and meth. I had vaguely heard of Jimson weed before, but wasn't very knowledgeable about it, other than reading Castaneda. We said sure, and drove to Jay's house. First, we smoked a joint, and then we divided up 2 pods between the 3 of us. The seeds were little, clear, and somewhat bitter. We decided we didn't want to waste any of the plant, so we brewed a tea with the shells and drank it. Then, we peeled off the inside skins of the pod and ate that, and finally, we smoked the outer shell. Then, we smoked another joint. During the first 20 minutes, nothing too noticeable happened. Colors seemed more vibrant, and my throat was getting kinda dry. When I went to the bathroom to pee, very little actually came out. Jay decided we should go to a different park nearby, as his parents would be coming home soon. As we were pulling up to the park, I basically felt the effects of being poisoned. I had jello legs, and my eyes couldn't focus on anything specific for very long. When we got to the park, we walked over and basically slumped down at a picnic table. At this point, my throat was painfully dry. We had a jug of water, which I kept drinking voraciously. I also really had to pee. I walked into a secluded area behind some bushes and tried. Nothing. Frustrated, I jello walked back to the table, and our friend G was randomly there. He was driving past and saw us. As he was talking to us, he could tell we were different and lackadaisical. "Oh, I know what you guys took," he said, and started laughing. I could barely look at him. He told us to call him later and tell him how our experience was. Then some girl came and sat down at the table and started talking to us. There's a school nearby, so there's lots of people in and out of the park. I don't remember what she said to us. Jay said he had to go home, and we thanked him for the Datura. Drew suggested we leave too, and we got in the Montero and left. Then, the unadulterated insanity began. Note, do not drive whilst on Jimson weed, ever. We left about 4 p.m. We pulled up to Drew's house around 9:30 with no memory of what happened in between. None at all. Anyway, as we pulled into Drew Street, we noticed a lot of our friends' cars lined up around his house. There appeared to be a party going on. We assumed it had something to do with Drew's brother. As we pulled into his driveway, the neighbor's cat ran in front of us. We felt a bump and knew that Drew had run it over. He felt really bad about it. Airwood note, driving whilst intoxicated, tripping, or extremely sleep deprived is dangerous and irresponsible because it endangers other people. Don't do it. We walked inside, and sure enough, there's a party going on. We see about 20 or so of our friends drinking, laughing, being loud. There were also strangers. Drew excused himself and went into his room, as he felt bad about the cat still. I was talking with some friends, and I noticed my friend Preston, who was there, was crying blood. It looked like eyeshadow, a blood circle around his eyes. It was horrifyingly bizarre, and then he looked like he was in pain. "Are you okay?" I asked, and he just stared at me with an almost evil gaze, blood dripping from his face to the floor. I saw grotesque people I didn't recognize who looked like Sloth from the Goonies, but not in a comical way at all. They looked deformed, bruised, beaten, and burned as they shuffled around the house. Some were laughing maniacally, some crying, others just staring. It was unsettling, to say the least. Things were also painted on. It's like a dream, and the 3D world is irrelevant. There were burnt cigarettes and tacks sticking sharp side up on the ground, and bizarre-looking plants pasted to the walls and doors. Then I saw people with beet red skin, crying blood. They looked like what you would expect demons to look like. Just like every fairy tale or myth or religious text makes them seem to be, minus perhaps wings. None of these seemed particularly odd to me at the time. I was confused who they were, but wasn't gripped with fear like I probably would be if I was sober. Some of those entities were having passionate, crazy sex in the back room, but they didn't look as if they were actually enjoying themselves. I kept hearing the sound of doors slamming. Drew came down to see what I was up to, and our friend Preston started talking to both of us. "You guys are late. We were waiting on you," he said. "We didn't know that this was going on," said Drew. "Where's Kyle?" I asked. Kyle is Drew's brother. "I haven't seen him yet," Preston replied. We talked, just the three of us, for a couple minutes, and then Drew excused himself to the bathroom. He couldn't pee the entire time either. Our throats were probably the driest they've ever been. It hurt to swallow. Then I met the spirit of the plant, Queen Toloache. As she is known indigenously and shamanically, she was pale, not just albino pale, but literally skin tone like the moon, and imperious. She is also fond of tricks. I talked to her for a bit, though I will not share the conversation, as I feel by doing so is disrespectful. I sat on the floor, still noticing the tacks which shimmered in my peripheral. My friend Chloe walked in through the kitchen, looking frail, beaten, and toothless. She explained that a group of Mexicans had just beaten and gang raped her. I looked over at a towel and a clear cylinder on the table. I didn't see the towel. I saw a talking head. This head was Chloe's. She was crying hysterically, and Toloaches told me to give her a hug, which I did. I was literally hugging a beach towel in plastic. "Oh my God, Sam, what the fuck?" She gut-wrenchingly yelped, and then started crying. At this point, I honestly didn't know what to do, but my bladder felt like it was going to explode, so I said I'd be back, and I went downstairs to the bathroom. Drew's mom was playing solitaire on the computer, and she said hello to me. I waved and went into the bathroom. Chloe was sitting in the corner of the ceiling laughing scarily. When I walked to the toilet, Chloe was standing in my way. "Chloe, can you please move? I have to pee like a racehorse." She just stared for a second and laughed. "Chloe, if you don't move, I'm gonna pee on you." She just laughed again, louder. So that's what I tried to do. Again, almost nothing came out, but I did feel better. I went back upstairs. My orange car parked right outside. He beckoned me to get in. I couldn't. The door was locked. He waved me inside. "I can't," I said. Then Tom started laughing, and this actually irritated me. "Forget it," I shouted. I was confused where my dad went, so I sat by myself on the curb. The house across the street has a wood stove-top chimney on the roof, but I saw someone committing suicide by hanging themselves instead. It was like an animated GIF. When my eyes moved at all, it would reset. When they stayed focused, the man would walk off the roof with a noose and hung there, waving in the breeze. I should have mentioned this earlier, but all straight lines shook. Like an episode of Dr. Katz, everything flickered actually, like I was witnessing the erosion of time. I had seen that kind of thing before while on strong acid, just lines, not anything else. I looked next to me, I'm still on the curb, and my friend Mike is by my side. "What's your problem, man?" he asked. "I don't know, dude," I said. "I took this plant earlier and now I can't tell exactly what's going on." He looked at me quizzically. "That's fine and all, and that would be a good excuse if you weren't being such an asshole right now." I felt like I was an asshole, ruining everyone's time, and I didn't know why. I glanced in Drew's Montero and saw possibly the scariest thing out of this whole experience. There was a pale creature with no eyelids, but with the most piercing stare I have ever seen in my entire life, sitting in the front passenger seat. His head was shaped almost like a shark's, pointing at the top. He had no lips, and sharp, shark-like teeth. In fact, he looked exactly like the Hellraiser character Butterball minus the sunglasses and paler. Just like in the movie, he said nothing. I had seen Hellraiser once before when I was 12 and remembered near nothing from it. It wasn't until I saw the movie again that I made this connection. In fact, I'm fairly confident Clive Barker has taken Datura before after going through this experience. And the fact he wore sunglasses in the movie, and in reality, call it what you will, had no eyelids at all. Seems more like a coincidence to me. This entity was the only one that I could not look straight in the face. I tried avoiding his gaze the entire time. I looked at a tree in the front yard. I could see a ghostly essence in the tree itself. Actually, I could see the essence of all plant life. Chloe was right by that tree, falling over. I rushed to help her, but she was painted on a tall piece of dead grass, blowing flimsily in the wind. I needed to pee again. I went inside through the garage and somehow Chloe had beaten me there and was crying on a coat rack. "I don't want to live anymore," she cried, and it was apparent to me that she was hanging herself. "Chloe, no," I said sorrowfully and reached to bring her down. It wasn't Chloe. It was just a coat. So I put the coat back and entered the kitchen. Kyle was there. "Yo, Samwise, how's it going?" I actually thought about that question and laughed. "I don't know. How are you doing, Drew?" I asked a piece of paper, which I thought was Drew, blowing from the fan. Kyle looked at me like I was the biggest dumbass in the world, and I don't blame him one bit. I went to the upstairs bathroom and the light didn't work, and the darkness seemed to make the vision stronger. The toilet seat was swirling, and it was fairly hypnotizing. I also saw what looked like a ghost or shadow creature on the floor next to the toilet, outlined by a translucent silver. He was completely two-dimensional and appeared to be asking for my help, though I couldn't actually hear anything he was saying. I finally peed, at least more than I had yet, and felt immensely better, though I felt sorry for the shadow creature. It was a kind of dusty bathroom. There were glowing insects attracted to the dust. They looked like ants, mini spiders, and other insects which probably don't exist, and they looked bioluminescent. I put my finger on the ground and let one crawl onto my finger. I examined it more closely, and its movements were exactly like a bug would be. It had feelers, and it was feeling me. I clamped my fingers together lightly, and the insect crumbled to dust, its legs floating, spiraling to the ground. I went back downstairs, and Toloache, still on the couch, asked, "Did you see life upstairs?" I nodded. I looked around. Demons and deformed burn victims were still walking around nonchalantly. When I went upstairs into Drew's room to see how he was doing, he was watching TV with Mike. Then we noticed the neighbor's yard via the window. It, too, was bizarre. There was a four-legged dog creature, very large, very black, with glowing red eyes, sitting on what seemed to be a throne on the side of a swimming pool. There were many people basically having a blood orgy, and massive amounts of steam were rising from the water. There were also dead squirrels which littered the ground, and all throughout the branches of a large tree were squirrel tails, hanging like evil Christmas ornaments. The dog, whom I later found out is a second spirit associated with Datura, or second half, depending on the perspective. He is known sometimes as the Guardian, or Protector, and protects Toloache. Noticed us and beckoned us to come join them beyond the fence. Drew grabbed his binoculars and scoped out the scene. People were still having insatiable sex through a bunch of mist. However, with the binoculars, we saw everything in grave detail. I could see the hair on this demonic dog and the squirrel's tails and everything in clear, high-definition detail. Me and Drew saw the same thing. Drew left to get a closer look, the dog and associates still beckoning us. Drew went to the fence line. As I stayed upstairs watching with binoculars, Drew almost jumped the fence to join them, but I tapped on the window and shook my head. He came back. We were tired and wanted to go to sleep. Drew has bunk beds and Mike called the top bunk. I said fine, but asked that he at least give me my sleeping bag. He said no. "Just give him his sleeping bag, Mike," Drew said. No. I tried pulling it from him, but to no avail. I didn't actually sleep. I woke up around 7:30 and decided to read up on Datura. Only when I got to the computer to do so, I couldn't read the text. My vision was okay, but when I tried reading smaller text than billboard size, it was out of focus. This lasted for 2 days, and during this time, I thought I was never going to be able to read again. Same with Drew. In fact, the trip lasted altogether for 3 days. My residues of it, like my eyes playing tricks on me, lasted for almost 2 weeks. I'll cut the other 2 days out, as this already been a very verbose story. I shall summarize some though. Everyone was worried about us. They thought we were never coming down. To be fair, neither did we. We saw Dr. Seuss creatures in trees, elves, gnomes, dwarves, pixies, demons, goblins, all kinds of mythical, demonic, spiritual creatures. And everything Drew saw, I saw, and vice versa. We ran over a ghost with a car. Digital clocks would make Tamagotchi-like animations. It looked 8-bit. The auditory hallucinations did stop after the first night. The visuals mostly after the third night. On the third day, me, Drew, and a couple of our friends went to a gazebo, our usual smoking spot, in a garden to smoke. I saw gnomes having sex in the trees. Little creatures would slowly bring antennas up out of the bushes, and whenever Drew and I would compare what we saw, our friends were like, "That's not fucking there. Stop it." A train went by, we weren't that far from the tracks, and an obese naked woman was having sex with a tree outside the garden. Every time she went down, the train blew its horn. The train was actually there, our friends acknowledged that. It was uncanny. She would stay down for 3 seconds and the train would blow its horn for 3 seconds. This experience has made me think about it every time I hear a train. I ran into Jay a few days later and he thought we had never left. He hung out with us all throughout the night. Also, amazingly, Drew's parents, who were actually there the entire time, had no idea we were on anything. I don't know how. We were talking to people who weren't there, basically in front of them. We were lucky in that respect. Afterthoughts. First off, I'd like to say, do not take Jimson weed. 99.99% of everyone should not take this. It's too common for someone to get arrested or end up in a psych ward, or even get shot walking into someone else's house not knowing what's going on. It's also very easy to be poisoned to death. People have died from this before. Also, you'll be tested by the spirits, and if you fail, there can be dire consequences, particularly with the protector wolf. It's not a pleasant high. In fact, there is no high. I felt completely normal despite the craziness I witnessed. It was kind of amazing I remembered taking anything at all. That's not common. I didn't really think twice about what I was seeing. Just like I probably don't in a dream. This is clearly a negative plane of existence. I don't know if I believe in hell, but if there is one, this realm is surely some kind of correlation. Also, it has been said that Datura seeks you out, not the other way around. I deeply believe this to be true, and I believe I was seeked out. I think Jay and Drew were caught in the crosshairs. To say this was just all in our minds is hard to justify. We interacted with people who weren't there simultaneously, witnessed the same things, and saw in blaring detail clearer images through binoculars. I omitted much of what happened, largely because of the length and largely because much of what I experienced I consider sacred, particularly some of the conversations. Not holy per se, but sacred. Also, I found that the first encounter with any entheogen/ally sets the tone for the rest of the relationship. Toloache still visits me personally periodically in my dreams. All in all, I am glad I experienced this, as I learned much, particularly about the nature of reality/realities. Wow, what a story. That was really great. One thing about Datura stories and Belladonna's, like deliriant stories in general, and sometimes, it's common in the psychedelic community as well. People will exaggerate or make up trips. So I'm not saying that this one is fake at all. It may very well be true. I've certainly had experiences that are similar to this. So, I just take these things with a grain of salt sometimes. But these substances can be absolutely fucking insane. And it's just kind of sad that sometimes people lie. Sifting through trip reports, sometimes they're not great, and it's pretty obvious. I'm doing the work to make sure that you guys are getting actual real trip reports. I'm going to be sure that every single trip report that I upload on this channel will be real. So you guys don't gotta worry about that with me. Yeah, that's it. Thanks. Bye.